Alexander Hamilton's Four Pillars. Alexander Hamilton was the United States' first Secretary of the Treasury, chosen by President George Washington on September 11, 1789. Hamilton's financial plan for getting America off to a good start was known as the Four Pillars. They are: Pillar number one, funding the national debt. Hamilton believed that a little debt was a good thing. He proposed that the United States government borrow money through the sale of government bonds to the wealthy of American society. This would then turn the upper class into investors in America, who would then cash their bonds in later and be able to make a profit, while lending money to their country when it needed it most. See, the way countries work is they often borrow money, the United States included, and so by the wealthy, the people who could afford it, when they invested in America, they would lend America money and then earn interest off of that loan. What they're doing is they're investing in, kind of like investing in a company. If I invest in the Walt Disney Company, then I'm going to go to Disneyland and I'm going to watch Disney movies because I want the company to be successful because I'm invested in the company. When you invest in a country, you want that country to be successful. And so Alexander Hamilton was pretty brilliant because he thought, you know what? If we can get the wealthy in America to lend America money, then they're going to be invested in America's future success. Also, we talked about in class the idea of credit worthiness. Individuals, families, they need good credit because at some point in our lives, we're probably going to borrow money. We usually borrow money to buy a car or later on in our lives to buy a home. And that's the same thing with the United States and with any other country. At some point in your life or in the life of a country, you're going to borrow money in a time of war. In a time of economic crisis, you're going to borrow money so the government can continue to function. We're having a little bit of a problem right now with our borrowing going out of control. We have a national debt that is approaching $20 trillion. But countries need to borrow money. That's just what they do. And so by having a little bit of debt and showing credit worthiness, showing the ability that a country has to borrow money but then pay it back, and the United States always pays back its loans, often by borrowing money from other people, then a country is able to show that it is worthy of credit and worthy of being lent money, especially when it's needed most. Pillar number two, assuming state debts. Hamilton wanted the states to maintain their good credit, so he proposed that the national government take over the states' debts and pay them off right away. Then he would encourage investors to use this cash to reinvest in United States Treasury bonds. Again, it's the idea of creating a sound financial footing. The United States was going to assume the debt, the Revolutionary War debt of all of the states that were still in debt, that still owed money. Now, there was a little bit of an issue here because some states like Virginia had pretty much paid off their debt, but Hamilton was able to negotiate with Thomas Jefferson and say, all right, listen, I know that Virginia doesn't need this as much as states like, say, New York or Massachusetts, but here's what we'll do. If you agree to assuming state debts, then I will agree to allow the United States Capitol to be in your part of the country. And so that's how we got the Capitol in Washington, D.C., which took land from Maryland and Virginia, which are states that are in the South. So that was how that deal was made. Pillar number three, imposing customs and excise taxes. Customs taxes, also called tariffs, were placed on goods coming into the country. Excise taxes were sales taxes placed on specific, non-essential goods, specifically whiskey. Hamilton hoped that these indirect, less noticeable taxes would quietly bring in lots of money to the U.S. Treasury. They did. We talked about tariffs, specifically protective tariffs, in class earlier. And one of the things that we talked about was how whenever goods would come into our country, if you bought goods, let's say that stuff came from Britain or France, or like today, stuff might come in from Japan or South Korea or China. China is our biggest, the country that sells us the most stuff out of any other country. There is a tariff that is always placed, a tax on goods that come into our country. We always want to encourage people to buy American and to purchase American manufactured goods, but when they can't or when they're not willing to, then we will tax those goods. And then, of course, that money goes to goes to the United States Treasury to pay for stuff that our country needs. So it's kind of win-win. You're either going to support our country, or you're going to support American businesses and American manufacturing, or you're going to support the American government through your excise taxes that you're paying on goods coming in from other countries. Finally, pillar number four, creating the Bank of the United States. Hamilton finally argued that the national government must have a place to keep its money safe. This institution, the Bank of the United States, would have the power to create a standard national currency and stabilize the economy. And that's what we've had ever since, some form of that. Today we don't have the Bank of the United States. Today we have the Federal Reserve. If you take a look at any dollar bill, $1, $5, $10, $20 bill, whatever you have in your wallet, you'll notice that it says Federal Reserve Note on the top of all of those bills. That's because the Federal Reserve is our version of the Bank of the United States today. So we still have that, just in a different form here in the 21st century.